Hello, I'm Daniel Hanvey for CampusTV. I'm here today with Steve Punt, who is recording an episode of the Radio 4 panel show The Third Degree, which pits students against their lecturers in a battle of the minds. You studied English at Cambridge, as I understand, which is where you first became interested in comedy, where you joined the Cambridge Footlights.
Yep.
What was university as a whole like for you? What was your experience?
I really enjoyed university, and I think I realised subsequently that I was quite unusual because I had a fairly strong idea about what I wanted to do, and I think that slightly changes the university experience in a way.
Yes,
because in a sense it frees you up. I think a lot of students spend a lot of their time wondering what they're going to do, and they're not quite sure. And I think actually that more students don't know what they want to do than do, which is fine, and that's another very common and potentially very fruitful way of approaching university, which is it gives you 3 years in which you can explore things and work out what you want to do. But if you do know what you want to do, university means you can kind of relax and concentrate. You can focus in the areas that you're interested in, because your other two A-level subjects that you had to do have finally dropped away. So I enjoyed it a lot, I think.
There are so many opportunities available for students at universities today, sort of much more than exist in the real world. So did you try anything else other than sort of comedy, or did you know that you were going to go into comedy?
I didn't really know. I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I knew that from very young.
Yeah.
But I didn't really quite know what sort of writer, and I also didn't know how on earth you went about being a writer, because my father was in the civil service and my granddad was an electrical engineer, so my family background was all people with salaries and proper jobs, as my mum would say, and I honestly didn't know how writers lived or what they did. And I would see names go up at the end of TV shows, comedy shows that I watched, and I would think, who are these people? And what do they do all day? Do they really just sit and type? And of course they do. But what I found at Cambridge is a very privileged place if you do comedy, in the sense that there's a structure there. And you could actually see people leaving, and then a few months later they would pop up on the radio or TV, or you would hear that they were touring in Australia or something. So you began to get an inkling of how things work, and the fact that if you don't have an office to go to, and you don't have to wear a suit, it isn't necessarily the end of the world. And I do think that was more of a big thing then. I think that's more understood now. And then I made one friend when I was in the sixth form whose father was a cartoonist. He was a man called Geoffrey Dickinson, and he used to draw for Punch magazine and lots of other. He was a very good cartoonist, actually. And I went to their house in Croydon, and in the hall of the house were these beautiful, hand-coloured cartoons, some of his and some of other well-known British cartoonists, all sitting framed in the hall. And I suddenly realised that this house, which is like a proper house, he didn't live in he didn't starve in a garret, like my mum thought all artists did. He actually lived in a proper house in Croydon. And I'd suddenly realised that this house had been paid for on the proceeds of drawing cartoons. And that it kind of could be done. The other great place for that is to go to, if you're interested in comedy, is to go to Edinburgh.
Yes.
Which is, people often ask, how do I get into comedy? And I think there are various things, but I think just going to the Edinburgh Fringe,
seeing what's there.
You don't really need to do very much. You can just treat it like Piccadilly Circus. If you just stand in the courtyard of the Pleasance, and if you don't start feeling excited about comedy while you're there, and you walk past a wall with like literally 100 posters for stand-ups who've actually written an hour-long show and got it on, and you're not thinking, do you know what, I want to write an hour-long show and get it on as well. if you're not inspired by the Edinburgh Fringe, you have to seriously question whether comedy is for you.
It's the right thing for you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So whilst you were there, I believe you met Hugh Dennis,
Yes.
who I'm sure a lot of our viewers will know and love.
Yes.
So your writing and performance partner, certainly for the Now Show, and I believe you do a lot of the stuff behind the scenes for him as well.
I do a lot of writing for him.
Yes. Yeah. So how quickly did you realise that you worked well together?
Well, Hugh's an interesting, but he is a genuine example of what the Footlights is legendarily is. But Hugh had no intention of being in comedy or acting or anything at all.
No.
He was. His brother is a diplomat, and he did geography, and he was almost certainly going to go into, and in fact did go into, marketing. You can't force it.
No.
It just will happen to you over time.
Yeah.
So the range of things that you can write about sort of expands. I always think that you can gauge the age of a stand-up pretty much exactly
By what they're talking
from
about.
what they're talking about.
Yeah.
If they're talking about flat sharing,
They're fairly young.
breaking up with your girlfriend in his 20s, and then in their 30s they talk about becoming a dad or becoming a mum. And then they start to talk about when your parents are getting old, and it's the stand-up comedy kind of follows you through life until you like Billy Connolly now is just lots of jokes about being old and not being able to do this and that anymore, and so I think to an extent you kind of grow old with your generation of comics in a way, and they're all mining their real lives for material.
So you're here today to record an episode of The Third Degree.
Yes.
I understand you've already recorded 2 episodes this week, so
yes, this is a bit
busy.
of a weird week. I've actually been in a theatre show for 2 months, which is something just relatively new for me, and it was very enjoyable, but it meant that I wasn't around for 2 months. So we recorded 2 Third Degrees in January, and then we've had a long gap, so now we have to do the rest
getting back into
quite
it
quickly. When I look at the questions for a subject like maths or physics, I just realise how much I don't know, which I think maybe that's an interesting thing about university is the more educated you are in your one area, the more you realise you're never going to know about
life is huge,
everything else, and it's a hallmark, I think, of educated people is they tend to be very aware of what they don't know. Most comedians, comedy writers that I've known know a little about a lot. That's why QI works.
Yes, because
comedians tend to just have lots of trivia in there, and they'll know a little bit, and they'll know odd facts about a lot of things, but they won't know very much about anything. Which is what you need for writing jokes. You need to be able to connect this and that up. Slightly back the other way. There's nothing to stop a scientist reading Thomas Hardy or James Joyce, but I am unlikely to go off and investigate high-level organic chemistry. So you sort of you feel sometimes, if you've done humanities, a bit kind of trapped in your. I mean, it's quite. This becomes quite a serious discussion actually, as people then move into positions of power or move into the civil service, or because there is a very widespread view that there simply aren't enough people in government or in Whitehall who really understand science.
Yes.
Because there's a huge humanities bias.
Everyone appears to have studied PPE at Oxford.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or they've got degrees in classics or history.
Yeah.
And there's a very strong feeling, I think, that there ought to be more scientifically, mathematically qualified people at high level. But I guess that's because they tend to be doing that. They tend to be doing science. They tend to be watching leptons hitting gluons or whatever they do.
Thank you very much for the interview. Finally, what one tip would you give to students before they leave university and head out into the big, bad, scary world?
I think that sometimes it's hard to appreciate when you're at university that you won't ever have this concentration of stuff going on around you again. you won't be able to walk past the notice board and there'll be plays on and bands playing and club nights and, you know, a skiing trip, and all this will just be happening on a plate right in front of you.
Yeah.
And you begin to take that for granted and think, oh, that's like, I'll always be able to do that. But you won't, you know. Everything becomes more of an effort once you've left. You have to travel further to things, you have to work harder to find them. And they cost more as well.
Yeah.
You know, you suddenly have to pay full price for everything.
Yeah.
So I suppose I would say take advantage of all the stuff that's going on. You realise when you've left university is that you won't ever again be surrounded by people your own age all the time.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing when you start work is all of a sudden you remember that there are children, and you remember that there are like middle-aged people.
Yeah.
To remember that the world is wider and bigger than university sometimes leads you to believe. But on the other hand, that thing of being cocooned in your generation for 3 years can give you tremendous confidence, and so that you know by the time you meet everybody else again, you know who you are. Yeah. And I think that's a really good thing. Yeah. That you can come out of university knowing much more about yourself than when you left the sixth form. Sure. Okay. It's my fantastic word of wisdom there. Yeah.
I'd listen to him.
I was horribly spoilt by my mum.
Yeah. I was exactly the same.
And I would offer to wash up and she would say, no, I want it done properly. And that kind of thing. And then suddenly, no, you have to wash up. You have to ensure your shirts are clean.
Yes.
And and these are little things, but in the end, they're really quite important.
Yeah. Okay.
So there you are. You see, the net result of 3 years at a leading university is you should know how to use a washing machine.
I think that's a lesson that quite a few students could probably use.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of cliches in comedy are true, and the cliche of coming home with a massive bin bag full of washing,
absolutely true,
is certainly true, isn't it?
I've definitely done that.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much for the interview. It's been a pleasure.
I'm looking forward to the show.
So am I.